Clune's Booktown Festival is a celebration of the book, filled with bookstalls, author talks, workshops and thought-provoking conversations in the historic Victorian township of Clunes.
This is a panel, Cosy Crime, Plots, Puzzles and Characters minus the Gore. And today's panel is in partnership with Sisters in Crime Australia, the awesome sisters. Are there any sisters here? I know Maggie's here, Linda's here. Yeah, any brothers-in-law? No, we'll get you later. We are also having this panel on the traditional lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung people, who are our original storytellers. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. My name is Jacqui Horwood. I'm your host for today. I am on the board of Creative Clunes, who brings Booktown to you. I am a member of Sisters in Crime. I used to be a convener, but I'm now on the Australian Crime Writers Association committee, so I know my crime quite well. I love crime. So when I told people I was going to do a Cosy Crime panel, I was astounded by people saying to me, "What's that? What's Cosy Crime?" And I thought, don't you know the great divide between cosy and hard-boiled? I'm astounded. So here today to discuss what cosy is, I've got three fabulous writers. And because I'm a librarian, this is in order of your surnames. On the order in which you would appear on my bookshelf. So I'll start with you, Aoife. Aoife was born in London of Irish parents, studied arts law at the Australian National University and now lives in Melbourne. Aoife is the author of best-selling literary crime novels Second Sight, which was runner-up in 2019 for Crime Book of the Year at the Davitt Awards, and All These Perfect Strangers, which was long-listed for both the ABIA General Fiction Book of the Year and the Voss Literary Prize, which is no mean feat. When We Fall, the third book, was the only book shortlisted for Best Crime Fiction at both the Ned Kelly and the Davitt Awards in 2023. She's an SD Harvey Short Story Award winner, has a Scarlet Stiletto, and has been shortlisted for the UK Crime Association's Debut Dagger, among other awards. Her award-winning crime stories or short stories have been published in Australia, UK and US. And today we're discussing her new novel, It Takes a Town. Welcome, Aoife.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Coleman on the end. Elizabeth grew up in Newcastle in New South Wales. She's a successful screenwriter, playwright and author. Elizabeth wrote the hit plays Secret Bridesmaid's Business, it's awesome, and It's My Party and I'll Die If I Want To, and co-created and wrote the popular ABC drama Bed of Roses. Her other screen credits include some seminal viewing, Sea Change, The Secret Life of Us, and many episodes of Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. Elizabeth's debut novel, Losing the Plot, was published in 2019. The first book in her Edwina Ted Bristol Murder Mysteries series, which we'll be discussing today, is A Routine Infidelity, which came out in 2023, and book 2, A Dance with Murder, which was released at the start of last year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Welcome to Elizabeth. And lastly, but not least, you. Amanda Hampson. Amanda was born in New Zealand and is now a Melbourne-based writer, Fitzroy North, apparently. Mm. She's been writing professionally for more than 30 years and is the best-selling author of 9 novels, a few of which, The Olive Sisters, Two for the Road, The French Perfumer, The Yellow Villa, and many, many more. And the books we'll be discussing today are the wonderful Tea Ladies series. The first book, The Tea Ladies, and the second book, The Cryptic Clue, and the new one, which is being released now.
Well, it's actually available today, but not released for another week.
So you can go and get it at readings. Oh, there's a copy there. It's called The Deadly Dispute. The Tea Ladies won the 2024 Danger Awards for Best Crime Fiction. That's the Sydney Bad Awards, and were shortlisted for the 2024 Davitt Awards Best Adult Crime, and the 2024 Ned Kelly Awards Best Fiction. Welcome. Oh. Yeah. Up close. Oh, sorry. They're just giving me instructions up close. So when people have asked me what Cosy Crime is, I have taken the quick and lazy response and referenced Agatha Christie because it's really simple. But let's pull it apart now. What is Cosy Crime? What makes it distinctive to other forms of crime fiction? I'll throw it open. What is Cosy Crime?
Well, I'm also a bookseller, so I get to think about these sort of things all the time. For me, and when I saw this question, Jacqui sent the questions through just for us to have a think about, And because in the last few years, there has been an expansion of what typically we thought of as cozy crime. So it used to be, it was about that there wasn't very violent at all. The violence sort of takes place off the page. There might be the suggestion of it, but definitely there's been an expansion to also include funny crime as well. And what I've decided for me, and I'll be interested to hear what the others think, but for me, it's really about the mood of the novel, which is it's quite optimistic. And that's why I think there's been a huge explosion in it, because life is pretty tough at the moment. Escapist fiction is becoming more and more important. Many people in the audience probably are aware of or are reading romantasy, which is two of the most escapist of genres, romance and fantasy together. And cozy crime is a bit like that too, in that crime novels such as, if you're looking at your noirs and all the rest of it, it's usually quite a bleak view of the world. Even if you took the crime out of it, it'd still, the tone of it is quite bleak. Whereas I think what is across all of our novels, even though we might be doing different things in our novels, is there's a sense of optimism and that life is good. We've still got a crime to kind of deal with. But on the whole, there's an optimistic point of view. So that's what I sort of think about when I think about cozy, which is definitely an expansion on what it used to be.
Yeah, I think I couldn't say that any better. I agree with all of that. I think cozy crime, there's a faith in humanity that's not always there in bleaker crime. Ultimately, we believe in the good of human beings in spite of what's happened. I think that's another relevant factor in cozy crime. Yeah, just that hope and belief in the ultimate goodness of people eventually.
I agree with that. And I think at the moment, somebody recommends a book and I say, is it dystopian? Because I'm living that. I can read The Guardian. Does it have child abuse? Because I can't bear to read that.
Yeah.
Does it have violent crime? And if you want to watch Netflix, there's all these, what do you say, gore, explicit sex, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I wanted to get into this area where we can make people laugh, uplift people. I think the crime thing is a little bit of a, can I say red herring? Because it kind of weaves the story together, which is really about humour and personalities, and for me, about the 1960s and things that happened in the 1960s. One of the slightly controversial things is about swearing or cursing. And much as I do like to curse myself, I don't have it in my books because I know a lot of older people are tired of it. And there's too much of it. But actually people in the 60s did not swear as much as people did today. You swear with impunity. So that's another little element as well as the violence, I think, or lack of violence.
I've got swearing in my book, so. But mine's not in the 1960s, it's today.
Yeah, that's right.
It's okay.
Yeah. So from Aoife, from what you were saying about the expansion of cozy, when you look back to the golden age, when you're looking at Agatha Christie and Dorothy L. Sayers and all those great writers, so much of it was about the puzzle and working out who did it. And that, for me, I know for many of you who probably read Agatha Christie as a young person, trying to solve it before Miss Marple did was the key to it. Absolutely. Do you think we've pushed past that, or do you think the puzzle is still at the heart?
No, I don't think it's at the heart, but it definitely is still part of it. And for all of us, definitely when I'm thinking about it in my books, I still want the puzzle to be there because that is sort of the heart of the promise of crime fiction, in that it's asking the reader or inviting the reader to be active and holding out a hand saying, if you pay attention, if you spot the clues, you can get there before the protagonist. And I think that's very attractive. But I totally agree, Jacqui, with what you were saying, because Golden Age was all about the puzzle. Yeah. But it wasn't about the psychology. No. And we are far more psychologically literate audience now. We want things, and I always think about it, I want things to be plausible. So it is not plausible anymore for Hercule Poirot to get all the murder suspects in a room and go, it's you? No, it's you. Yeah. No, and both of those to be plausible.
Do it on Death in Paradise.
Yeah.
Come on.
You can still get away with it, but not the way you used to. And so if you want things to be psychologically plausible, in a sense, the puzzle has to be different. Also, I think that the humour side that Amanda was just alluding to as well is far more present. You can say Agatha Christie is an absolute genius on many, many fronts, but she's not necessarily a genius at sentences, and she's not necessarily a genius at humour. Dorothy L. Sayre, for example, was. She's very funny.
Yeah.
But that wasn't as crucial as it kind of is now. So I'd say now there's a bigger thing about being funny, because that's back to the optimism. So the puzzle's still, it's important that the puzzle's there, but it's a different form of puzzle these days.
It's they're more character driven now. We delve much more deeply into the characters and the motivations and the personal nature of that and who they are and why this happened. The Golden Age did, I think, too.
But it's the puzzle that makes it a page turner, that just makes you push on. And I think for authors, I don't know, somebody said to me recently, oh, how's the manuscript going? All going smoothly? I said, are you kidding? Do you know anything about writing? No, it's not going smoothly. That's not how it works. And it's the puzzle that's the hard part, I find, because it's all the smoke and mirrors of having a little clue over here so the reader clocks it but doesn't register it, I would say. But then later on when they go, oh, that's what that letter was about. So that is the thing that just winds it up, I think. And that's once you get it, yes, it's great, but it's painful getting there.
It's incredibly difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have some miraculous ending that people couldn't have guessed, some clue popping up out of nowhere or some person popping up out of nowhere, because that's really unfair. But at the same token, you don't want it to be obvious. You don't want the readers to be able to pounce on the clue straight away. So it's this very delicate dance of kind of laying things down very gently and then distracting people, but ultimately satisfying them, going, damn, I could have got that. Yeah.
I mean, that's the holy grail of every crime book ending, which is, I didn't see that, but now you've told me, how could it possibly be anybody else?
Yeah,
that's the holy grail. Yeah. And it's still, when we're talking about playing fair, we're still going back to the golden age of crime fiction, which is you had to play fair. Yeah. The clues had to be there. And in order to do that, it is so hard because they're hiding in plain sight. And that's the gift of trying to do that. And it's a lot of work.
The Cosy Crime too's generally been the place for the amateur detective. Do you think that's still a key, that the most unusual people can play a role? The people who are generally invisible in society, older women, parish priests, the people who wouldn't necessarily play a role. Do you think that's still a big part of Cosy? And I know Ted Bristol's a detective, but generally...
Done like a course, the online course.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you could Security Academy, Old Coast, so yeah.
So do you think it's still the place for people to play detective who would not normally do it?
Well, yes and no is the answer. I think it's for anyone. And then part of the humour or the reality is that if it's an unexpected person who's involved, there's an element of humour in that, like the tea ladies. But then also that makes a lot of sense too, because the tea ladies know everything. So I do think that. But that said, I've written 4 books and 3 of them were never classified as cosy. 2 of them probably were classified as noir, and they're done by amateurs, not the conventional person. And to be honest, there's the same level of violence in all of them. So I think it just gets back to whatever it works, but going back to that idea of humanity, exactly what was being said before about faith in the world. So in my novel, there's lots of characters, including 2 police people who are investigating the crime, because that's the reality of what would happen. How fanciful you want to get. And Cosy allows an element of fancifulness too, if you want to embrace that.
So you touched on this, Aoife, but we'll go back to right now. We're seeing a huge explosion in Cosy Crime. It's never gone away. We've all been watching it and reading it. Kerry Greenwood's long literary history in writing, Franny Fisher and Karina Chapman tells us that Cosy's been around a million years. But right now we're seeing a surge, and you can't touch on it without mentioning Richard Osman because juggernaut. So what is behind this? And I know you touched on it, but I'd like to explore why Cosy has really exploded.
Well, I think it's partly to do with that amateur status. I think it allows the reader to be closer to it. And let's face it, we're all a little bit nosy. I certainly am. All right, if something's going on, I'm interested. I don't need to gossip about it, but I like to get to the bottom of it. And I think, is anybody not nosy here? Go on, put your hand up. He's not nosy, one man.
That's why we have Facebook.
Yeah, that's right. So, you're putting the reader right in the story when you have an amateur detective and, they get to find that puzzle and find that way. But it is also that escapist fiction. I mean, Richard Osman, that was just amazing. And he's really paved the way for all of us to follow by people going, oh, actually, this is fun. This is escapist. These are normal people like me. They don't have great big moustaches or speak in exotic accents.
Recognise that world. That's a world I know.
Great.
Yeah. I think since COVID, across the world, there has been a drop in the sales of non-fiction and an increase in the sales of adult fiction. And it's really, really noticeable. And that is just the truth, as Amanda was saying before. The world is bloody tough at the moment, and we all need our escape from it in all different forms. So I think that's why it's having a moment now. I went at the start of my career, Jacqui mentioned that I was shortlisted for the Debut Dagger, and it was a novel that you only had to write a couple of chapters, and of course that's all I wrote for it. But it was a novel based on a kindergarten teacher's solving a crime that takes place in their kindergarten. This is way before Leanne Moriarty had the same idea, but it's a great idea and she made it work. And part of that prize was, because it's a UK-based prize, was to say you got a whole bunch of feedback about your idea. And the feedback at the time was Cosy Crime doesn't sell, and that was classified as Cosy Crime. Better off trying America because you won't get a book deal in the UK. And so that was all the feedback I got.
What year was that?
Yeah.
So that would be about 11 years ago or so, I think. Maybe 11, maybe 12 years ago or so. And I thought, to be honest, at the time, I thought, well, that's the end of me in writing then, because that's the idea I've got and everyone's saying no to it. And, I'm getting it from, think of that now with Richard Osman. Now, Amanda and I were lucky enough to meet Richard Osman when he was out in Australia last.
He looked a complete wreck. They should know. This is what happens when you're the golden goose, is they flew him out for 4 days. He walked in, he was just like this. And he just signed books.
He had to sign something like 5,000 or 1,000 books while he was out here for Penguin. Yeah.
I heard him the other day saying he signed 48,000 books.
I heard that too.
But one thing, I think that the fact that Richard Osman is really well known in the UK, he's really popular in the UK. So let's say he wrote any book, lots of people have heard it. Then you get that kind of tipping factor because he was popular in the UK way before he really hit home here. And suddenly he's, selling books and creating this great wave.
Well, let's look at your own writing, because I think we touched on this before when we were talking. Do you see your books as cosy? Like, you've got a shock to say, well, you've defined this story as cosy. Do you all see your books as cosy books, or is this a surprise to you?
I think Ted would take offence to the word cosy. She's kind of a scrappy thing, loves a bit of argy-bargy. So I tend to refer to it as cosy crime with guts. So I guess cosy just in the sense that it's not bleak, that it is hopeful, ultimately hopeful about human nature. I guess, yes, I think of it as cosy. But, for Ted's sake, I like to add with guts. Yeah.
No, I love the term cosy. Who doesn't like being cosy? It's, I think it's a great term. And I have to say, in the last 50 days, we know what that means, as I've sat down at my computer and immersed myself in the 60s, it's been a great relief from the news cycle. Yeah. Even though there was a lot of bad things happened in the 60s, I don't touch on the negative things of the 60s. I kind of play with them. I play with microfeminism, I play with ageism, all those kind of things. And for me, they completely fit into the cosy genre. You can be very flexible in that regard.
What's appealing about writing a cosy crime?
Well, I was going to say probably I don't have any problem with books getting classified because I'm a bookseller and I'm realistic about how the market works. You've got to give as much sort of information to the reader. When they come in, they're only going to look at your book for a minute before they decide whether they want to buy it or not. So anything that's a bit of a hint and direction is always good. That said, my books are no more violent or less violent than books that were classified as noir, which is, I'm not a very violent person in real life, I'd like to say. But also with my books, it's certainly there and realistic. I think it's important to remind the world, and this gets back to the optimism idea, but it's that we should be optimistic about so many things, but yet we're so dominated by a news cycle and a social media that is so negative, looking for conflict all the time, that we kind of forget wonderful things like, say, this festival, you know.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of volunteers have worked their butts off to bring this every year so we can all get together in person, and that's just
And talk about books.
That's right. You know,
Look, for me, I love writing humour. And, you know, when you write humour, it's very, very similar to doing stand-up, I think. But you don't have to do it. It's great. Because you have to go over and over and over it because the timing is so important. And I absolutely love it when I see reviews. There was one fantastic review on Goodreads where the woman said, I was snorting so much reading this book that I woke my husband up, and that takes some doing.
yeah.
Well, let's delve into your books. We've got an array of different sorts of settings and characters. Elizabeth, yours, you have the amateur detective, Teddy. It's present day. It's in inner Melbourne and a few forays beyond Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yours is present day with a town of people in a place that may or may not be Bathurst. And, of course, yours is in the 60s in Sydney. Yeah. So we have got an amazing array of things. So, Amanda, the Tea Ladies were in Sydney in the 60s. And then if you read the first book, Hazel, the main character, you call her the main character, the driver of the story, Hazel, works for Empire Fashion that makes new traditional 40s, 50s well-fitted gowns. And then one day, Jean Shrimpton goes to Melbourne Cup in a miniskirt and changes everything. In the second book, we have the background of the building of the Opera House. Yeah. So how do you decide which, because it's difficult to balance your fiction and bring real life events into it.
Well, that's what I love.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in social history. I'm very interested in not dates and things so much as what were people talking about at the dinner table in this particular time. And so you have to read papers. Look, I was a teenager in the 60s, so I remember it really vividly. I decided on 1965 to start the story because of Jean Shrimpton, because I just I don't know about you guys, but you sort of have this, well, if the protagonist is this age, then this would have happened, so they would have lived here. So there's this process of elimination of deciding who, what, where, when, and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, Jean Shrimpton would have, how many people remember the whole Jean Shrimpton business? Quite a few. Oh, these two, those, but not at the back. I must see all the young people. Look it up, Jean Shrimpton. So she wore a mini dress, very modest, down to here, just a shift, you'd call it, to the races at a time when we wore hats and nets and fox furs with the fox still head hanging in it, and gloves and stockings, and she just wore this frock, and it set Australia on fire. It was on the front page of every single paper for days. It was so out there. So I thought, okay, that would have turned the garment industry upside down. So you're looking for potentially catastrophic things to work around. So of the tea ladies, and there's four main tea ladies, the first book's 1965, set in 66, 67 is The Deadly Dispute, and that's set down at the docks when it was run by the painters and dockers. So I'm looking for what was of interest. That at that time, Sydney was the crime capital of Australia. There was levels and levels and levels of corruption right up to the Premier. So, okay, to me, that's an interesting time to set it in. And I have a cop who I consult with about this kind of stuff, and he was a buddy of Roger Rogerson's. So he was a corrupt cop. And when I said, you know, this next book, I'm going to have Hazel work down at the wharves, he said, oh, you can't send Hazel down there. That was really dangerous. There was the toe cutters gang. Self-explanatory. And, you know, Hazel's a fictional character. You know, I'll look after it. It'll be fine. So I find that really interesting as a framework to the crime and to the characters and to the story.
And the characters in themselves, we've got four tea ladies, some love characters, some very smart women. And it's you described it to me as microfeminism, the way you've got these four characters who would in normal life be ignored and they'd just be there. but they undermine everything with their intelligence and their force.
Well, that is older women. That's what we are. We're intelligent. We're capable. We've lived lives. Look, one of my absolute favourite lines that I ever wrote in the cryptic clue was the 4 tea ladies have to go out to sort of effect a rescue in the night, and there's a man present, and he says, I'll come with you. And Hazel says to him, you better stay here. This could be dangerous. Now, probably women know why that's funnier than men do, because we've been putting up with this for hundreds of years. So it's really fun to kind of turn those things, on their head. And look, I think older women are incredibly capable and overlooked. They're on committees, they're on boards, they're caring for sick people, they're caring for grandchildren. And, for some reason, society's decided because we're not decorative anymore that we're not of any interest. Well, that's just not true.
So where did they come from, the tea ladies? Did you have old women in mind that helped form them?
I came from Facebook. So what happened is I loved Agatha Christie. When I was about 13, I read about 25 Agatha Christie's back to back. And didn't we all? And so I always had in my mind, I quite like to write a mystery, sort of Agatha Christie type thing. And so I read a lot of historic pages on Facebook where people post their own photos from the past. And there was a picture of a tea lady, and she had a trolley and the teapot and her penny, and there were hundreds and hundreds of comments. People said, oh, we loved our tea lady Mildred, blah, 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 blah. And somebody wrote, the tea lady knew where the bodies were buried. I was like, okay, done. Got it completely. I could see completely how that would work, that they would know everything that happened in the building. And, to be in the 60s when I did actually work in a clothing factory in the 70s. And so I know what the social stratas were. The factory girls never went above the factory floor. Each level was a strata because that social differentiation was so strong at that time. So, but okay, the tea lady would have diplomatic immunity. Yeah. And so I could instantly see how it could work. And they're collaborative. They're going to have a network of tea ladies. They've got Mrs. Lee at the cop station. They've got Effie Finch at the fire station. They get them down.
Love it. Secret.
It's so obvious.
Secret. Thank you. Elizabeth, you have a nod to Christie in your book. Teddy's dog is Miss Marple. So you're obviously acknowledging where you're coming from. What is not particularly Christie is Ted's hobby of swordcraft.
Yes.
Can you tell me what swordcraft is and how it found its way into your books?
Swordcraft is where a bunch of people get together. It happens in Melbourne regularly on a Friday night, and they all dress up in costumes. So knights, elves, fairies, dragons, all kinds of stuff. And they fight each other with foam swords, stage kind of medieval sword battles. And there's in different war bands, they call them, and then there's all these different war bands. And then they all come together and fight and have a bit of a tussle.
So do you do it?
No.
So you watched it and thought,
You can tell us, come on.
No, I actually don't. What happened was, would you believe we had a pet sitter who couldn't look after our pets this few days because she had swordcraft. And I went, oh, what's that? And she told me, and she was doing it at Cryal Castle in Ballarat, medieval theme park. So we went to watch, my husband and I went to watch, and it was such fun. They were all having the time of their lives and all dressed up, taking it really seriously and yelling out stuff like, for blood and frost and stuff like that. And I was developing Ted at the time, and I thought, this would be a great hobby for Ted, because Ted is not into cosplay, she's not into fantasy or any of that kind of stuff, but I knew she would love the idea of sanctioned violence. So she's actually has a guy under surveillance who's put in what they think might be a shonky workers' comp claim. So she's following him, and she goes to the Western Oval in Parkville where this actually happens, and turns out he's actually telling the truth, and he can't join in. He's just watching this week, but she sees Sawcraft, and it's like a revelation to her. Although I have to say, in my books, it's a little bit more rough and tumble than in real life. We went to watch in Parkville not long ago, and they just walked to each other. I'm like, we're walking, and they said, "Oh, we don't want anyone to get hurt." Careful. Yeah, I just thought it would be a fun thing for her.
It was lovely. Yeah. So you've had an amazing career: screenwriting, script writing, books. How does one inform the other? Is there different techniques for writing all three? Does one help with the other?
Yep. Novels, it's the ultimate freedom. It's just you and the page. And I absolutely love that. You can be anywhere, do anything. You can have a million characters. In television, you're always at the mercy of the budget. So you're going, I want a party with 200 people. Sorry, you can have 3 people walking around the background. Or, if it's raining, you've got a scene outside that's really important in the cemetery, and they go, sorry, can't shoot, it's raining. There's got to be in the cemetery. No, put it inside. So you're at the mercy of the budget. There's also a lot of collaboration, and I use that term euphemistically, so that you quite often you'll write a script and everyone will go, oh, it's brilliant, we love it. And you're like, great, they love it. And then cut to 6 months later and you see it on screen, you're like, what happened? There's just so much interference. It is really great in terms of economy, though, that I've found helpful with writing novels. In TV, the rule is get into the scene as late as you can and get out of the scene as early as you can. So you really learn about economy, and you really learn about early in my career, I was writing to commercial breaks. And so I think that's really helped me with structure, because I got used to kind of creating little mini cliffhangers as I went. And so I think I've got this innate thing in my head that goes, oh, time for something to happen, time for a twist, that kind of stuff. But when I first wrote a novel, it was really difficult because I was so used to, you've got nowhere to hide with a novel. With screenwriting, you can count on the pictures, you can count on the director, the actors, you can cut out of a scene if it's not quite working. All you have to say is a glorious sunset, and someone will take care of the sunset for you. So in my first book, I was kind of like loving the dialogue and having so much fun with the characters. And the publisher said to me, we need a bit more context, where they are, what does it look like? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Nobody's going to do that for me. Yeah. So that was real learning. That was a real learning experience. And in terms of theatre is very different because it's so immediate. And it grows and evolves. So you can sit in the theatre and watch something and go, oh, that line's not working. I know what would be better. Fix it for the following week. And you can have this amazing experience, and the intensity of this is quite different. And you can sit in a theatre and have people all around you responding to your work, hearing them laugh or hearing them go, oh, don't do it, whatever. It's so great. And it's lovely to see someone reading your book on a bus. That's fantastic too. And to watch people watching something you've written on screen. But yeah, I think they're all different, but they certainly all inform each other.
So what was the experience like? You wrote original work with Sea Change and Secret Life. What was it like to enter Miss Phryne Fisher and adapt some really well-loved characters and books?
That wasn't the primary adapters were Fiona Eager and Deb Cox from Every Cloud Productions. But I was certainly intrinsic to the team. It was really interesting. It was a really delicate dance, Phryne, in terms of getting the tone right, because if it was too glib, couldn't be glib because then she just looks like a frivolous socialite, and she had to have something in her life beyond just this little hobbyist crime-solving side hustle and being glamorous. She did. So it was all about grounding Phryne. So they added a backstory that wasn't in the books about a sister that she had who was kidnapped and never found when she was in her teens, just to sort of help drive Phryne emotionally. But really it was the main thing. I mean, Essie was so amazing. The main thing, and the Jack Robinson sexual tension we added, and that was really interesting too, because so you had Phryne and Senior Detective Jack Robinson both solving a crime, and she was the fly in his ointment. But of course, needless to say, they were really attracted to each other. But we had to be careful of juggling it and not at the ABC always used to say to us, don't emasculate Jack. Don't emasculate Jack. So Phryne would always have to solve the crime. Phryne would solve the crime and nab the person, and then like approximately 3 seconds later, Jack would burst into the room because he'd worked it out as well. So yeah, it was really fun, interesting. And I mean, Kerry, the source material is so amazing, but hard to do a bad job with something that was so wonderful to begin with.
Thank you. Aoife, it takes a town. It did take a town. What fascinates me is you have a town full of people solving a crime. How did you keep it together? How did you work out where everyone was and what everyone was doing with a cast of very colourful characters?
It certainly was harder than I expected. So I knew I wanted to do a town, and this gets back to talk about Cosy can be escapist, but it also can be realistic. And I am from Bathurst, that's where I grew up, and I had always not wanted to use a real town for the basis for my fiction because I kind of felt really bad coming from a town myself, that you would use a real town, put a terrible murder in it, and that might be the only book that ever got written about that town, something that you made up, a terrible thing that you put everybody through. So I always, up till then, had made up my towns. You might get a sense of their geographical location, but they're not real places, until Bathurst, being lovely, picked my third book, When We Fall, to be their Great Bathurst Reads. And so the town read the book and then gave me all this feedback on it. And they have a festival too, a word festival.
Feedback?
Yeah, well, because I was supposed to go to the festival and they have a panel beforehand just analysing the book. Oh, wow. Yeah. But what happened, COVID happened, of course, so I had to beam in. I missed that panel and I had to just do my panel virtually. But what was really clear from my panel alone was that no one had any problem at all with setting a murder in a country town. And there I'd been so precious for so many years that I went, And it was such a nice experience. I thought, damn it, I'm setting the next one in my hometown. So it's not called Bathurst, it's called Welcome. But it also, Bathurst, as those of you that might know the place, it's 35,000. And so regularly when we talk about, it's rural noir and all the rest of it, it's like 100 people in the town. There's not that many towns that have actually got 100 people. We're all bigger than that. And Bathurst is a regional centre. And so someone makes a joke about that when the cop who's just moved to the town from the city, from Sydney, is sort of like, being a bit dismissive. And they go, just so you know, we're a regional centre. I don't know what you're talking about being a tiny town. And some people even used to call Bathurst a city because it has the cathedral in it. That used to be the old definition. Yeah. And so it's sort of like going, I don't know who you're talking, that kind of attitude about being a bit sneery about country towns, because it's always assumed. And then even you say, like, I've literally got in it. No, we're a big town. And you'll still get people go, the setting is a small country town, and go, because not all towns are the same. And for anyone who's local to Clunes is very different from the towns around it. Bathurst is completely different from Oberon and Orange. And I wanted to catch that sort of specificity. But I also knew that I wanted to be broader than just the crime, which is something Amanda was saying before, that to write a book that even if you took the crime out of it, it'd be still an interesting kind of exploration of a 360-degree view of the town. So I wanted the teenagers who are resentful that they're in the town and it's the world's most boring place to them. I wanted middle-aged women who have lived their whole life in the town, who have a long-standing friendships. I wanted people who'd been multi-generational in the town. I wanted the local police in the town. I wanted all of them in there. But I also wanted that's a realistic nod to how investigations happen. An investigation would be really easy if one person knows everything that happened. But instead, you're always piecing together a little bit from here, a bit from there. That person saw something, but they didn't see the rest of it. And I also thought, this will be the easiest structure in the world to write, because if anything is getting too boring, I'll just swap to the next character. And, and you can have laughs in different ways and just different people's foibles. And someone who's a, tiny little dot in one chapter and someone's thinking they're doing that for that reason. The next chapter, the audience will realise that what that person's really up to. And I also wanted to play with the idea that we're all the hero in our own lives. And so there's sort of no secondary characters. Everyone's a main character for their bit of it. So all of those things were lots of fun, but it turns out it's actually really hard to do. So that was my learning lesson for that. it's hard to keep track. The hardest thing of all is not to go round and round in circles. Whereas in one chapter you learn something and the next chapter another character needs to learn the exact same thing again.
Yeah.
That's really boring. So that actually took a lot of work and a lot of edits, but it was super fun to do.
Yeah, and really well done. Really well done. So the person who gets it in It Takes a Town is Vanessa, who's a former child star who has, an array of really weird fans. And we as a society are fascinated by former child stars. Where are they now? How did they turn up? Is that something you wanted to play with, that fascination with the former child star?
Yeah. When I start a novel, I usually take two separate ideas that I'm quite interested in and shove them together and see what happens. So the ideas for this one was I wanted a long-term friendship to be at the heart of the novel and that friendship to be under probably the biggest amount of pressure, because it seemed to me that we've got all these ideas about, relationship breakdown, but if a best friendship breakdown is just as traumatic, and that best friend can actually be the person you're anchored through for life. So that was one of the things. The other one was a bit broader, but it was fame in general. Why, as a society, are we so interested in fame and so seeking out fame when we can see how toxic it is for the vast majority of people who are famous? Like, it might be financially rewarding at some aspects, but then just the cost of that, the personal cost is so hard. And of that, child actors are probably the most interesting, because I wanted to explore what is the idea when you're famous, when you don't even really know who you are yet, and how does that shape you as a personality? Because it seems to me there's an aspect of it where you kind of are frozen at the time you're famous and you never kind of get past it. So just this week, there's a whole blow up about people may or may not be aware about Millie Bobby Brown copying it because she's getting older, Is she too old? Is she whatever? All these people, the world has opinions and they get to put it on someone who's 21, and you just go, and so I really am interested. I'm interested in like sports stars, when you kind of think the peak of your existence happened in your teens. And then what do you do with the rest of your life? So it's so rich in human nature for the individual themselves, but also for society's response, that there's so much there to explore. So in mine, the person who dies is Vanessa. She's the most famous person this town has ever produced. She's recently come back to the town, having been out in the world, because it's been COVID and her acting career's dried up completely and she's sort of broke. She is only interested in what she can do to reinvent herself, to kind of get back to what she had as a child. And what she was sort of famous for, an ad. She went into something that's like Young Talent Time. She got into the soaps, and she's never been able to do more than that. But in the context of the town, she's the most famous person that they know. So that idea of she's never even famous enough for herself, but the town, she's so famous. And then, of course, she dies. And what do we do when everyone dies? We give them fame again, the fame that they were looking for while they were alive. The great irony that now that they're dead, everyone's saying nice things, which if they'd only said it when she was alive, could have made all the difference. Yeah. But also, she herself is a piece of work. So because she was a child actor and all the rest of it, there was so much rich humanity to play with.
Definitely. Before we open up to everyone, I want to ask another question. You've written standalones and you've got a series. You've done a bit of both. You've written 4 standalones. What are the pros and cons of writing a series, and what are the pros and cons of just sticking to the standalones? So if you've done 4, you've never thought, I'm going to take that character and keep it going?
I do get asked that a lot, of people saying, oh, wow, aren't you going to write another one with these characters? For me, they all are finished. Like, I've done with what I want to do with them. When you're writing a standalone, you get to have at your heart a real character and take them on the biggest journey of their life. And there's a real emotion and learning with that is inherently dramatic. In series, you are more likely to have to keep your characters quite similar. So a more two-dimensional character, and you would think of some famous series like Hercule Poirot does not change throughout the whole course of how many books, 20-something books or whatever. Miss Marple doesn't change either. And there's a reason for that, because you can't realistically keep on giving them life-changing events and having them be totally different from that. What you can do then is, and what, great series do, is they'll play things will change around them. And so the landscape or the city will change, will evolve. History, historical events will change the world around them, but fundamentally they stay the same. I wouldn't ever rule out not doing it. I think I could cope with, maybe doing a trilogy and just seeing something like that. But for me, all my books are quite different, and I like to challenge myself by doing something quite different every time. And so that's why it hasn't sort of appealed to me. Yeah.
Yeah. How long do you see Ted going for?
I'm working on 3 at the moment. But for me, it was actually, in contrast to that, was really important to me that Ted did grow and did change with each book, because otherwise I'm kind of not interested in a central character that's set in stone. So, she's got a lot of challenges from her childhood. She's got a bereavement that's messed with her really badly and has put up walls between her and the world. And so she gets to a certain point at the end of book 1, but she's not there yet. And so I wanted to keep, that's really super important to me. So for me, the main thing with the series is exposition is really difficult. How much should you write book 2 as if assuming people have read book 1? But you can't do that. You have to write it assuming they haven't, but you need to inform them of stuff without having all these, these long expository blocks. So that's quite tricky. But and people used to say to me, you'd be really good at cozy crime. And I kind of resisted for quite a while because I did think that. I thought, I don't want to write procedurals where the characters don't change. And then I thought, why can't I write one where the character does change and does grow and does shoot herself in the foot and stuff things up and learn a bit along the way and then sort of keep learning but keep stuffing up. And that was kind of really the premise. For me, it was, to be honest, more about Ted and her interactions with the world and the way she stuffs up her career sometimes and her vulnerabilities and everything. And crime was sort of happened to be in it as well, even though that, she was solving a crime. She was my primary interest. Yeah.
Well, I think writing a series is fantastic. I wish I'd thought of it earlier. I wish I'd had the idea earlier that I knew could continue. So I set out to write 5, going from 1965 up to the 70s. And look, people always ask me, what makes a bestseller? And I always go, it's zeitgeist. You just cannot pick it. You could start writing something now.
And you're writing, Amanda.
Yeah, and
you're writing.
Yeah. And by the time it comes out, people have lost interest in that. But the Tea Ladies was such an absolute breakout hit. It sold more than double of any of my other quite well-selling books and nominated for all these prizes. And so suddenly people are waiting for the second one and waiting for the third one, which with my previous books, nobody cared less. So, yes, I'd say it's taken me 20 years to become an overnight success. So I wish I'd thought of it earlier.
You were saying your publishers were really pleased that you'd finally landed into genre writing.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Somebody should have explained what a genre was. No. Look, a lot of writers start off writing something that interests them and they do not know what the genre is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or people write a book and then the publisher says, this is lovely YA, and they go, what?
Yeah.
So, we're not as smart as we look, is what I'm just going to say.
I think that's true. With the David Awards with Sisters in Crime, there's been a few people win awards going, was I writing crime? We were a bit astounded by it. Now, I want to open it up. Are you brave enough? Want to open it up to questions?
I have a lot of year 12s that are writing films, actually, so screenplays and that. But I often find that they struggle writing cliffhangers. Do you have tips for...
Tips for writing cliffhangers?
It's not easy. Definitely
Yeah, absolutely. So no wonder I'd like to hear them.
Yeah.
I think that, and it's hard as well because people love, I would sort of maybe even head them into twists, to be honest, rather than cliffhanger. I mean, in a technical sense, a cliffhanger would be good with chapters, and because you really want to do a full stop, but then want them to turn the page and start reading the next chapter because they have to. That's the job of a cliffhanger, just like after the ad break, basically. Yep. So usually in relation to that, if they're writing books or writing scenes, what you sometimes find is they've written too many sentences. So pull out that last paragraph and see if you're landing on a cliffhanger and answer it in the next moment. So that in a kind of very practical way can give you a cliffhanger. So see if you can just enter it on a strong note a little bit earlier and answer whatever question that they've asked in the next part. See if that works.
Yeah, I think also timing is not rushing to the thing, isn't it? Sorry, go on.
No, I just said I agree. That's nice. Yeah.
I mean, when you see television series like things like Downton Abbey, they have the slot, and you know this, and they go, oh my goodness, we're going broke, we're losing all our money, and then 15 minutes later, oh, we got a letter from our aunt, she's died, and left us their money. You go, really? Whereas in a, you know, you just need to stretch it out and make people work for it.
I went to a session with Andy Griffiths a million years ago when he was writing the Just books, and he said he would take Andy and just think, what horrible thing can happen to him? And then what more can I do to him? And then how worse, like he just added how bad can I make this person stuff?
That's a touch of a crime level too.
Yeah.
Angie, what else that's awful that can happen right now?
Yeah, and that's the rule for screenwriting too. Just do a shitload of terrible things to them and see how they get out of it, you know, excuse my language, see how they can.
Well, there's some screenwriters chase the monkey up the tree and throw stones at him.
I hadn't heard that, but that's perfect. Yeah.
But don't end on a cliffhanger. As a bookseller, can I tell you that? Yeah. People get so annoyed by that.
Yes, they do. I think the first time I came across that was one of Patricia Cornwall's books where the serial killer was in it, and it ends and she hasn't caught the serial killer. And I remember going, what?
Yeah,
when fun.
Yeah,
ripped off.
Tourism in Cosy Crime.
Well, so apparently, you know, it's really, really true, because the White Lotus series, which is all about terrible people in a beautiful location, terrible things happen, all of those resorts are booked beyond belief because people want to go to those resorts because they've seen how beautiful they are to experience. It's the exact same thing. Which is, so I got it completely wrong. I could have been doing advertising for small towns all this time.
I think the office. It's where the location is a character.
Yeah.
You think of your location as one of the characters in your book, and I think.
Well, think of Sea Change. How did that altered that part of Victoria?
Yeah.
I think also Home and Away is evidently responsible for a lot of British reverse migration, because they come here, find they're living in Penrith and not in Palm Beach, and go home.
You mean it's not true? I think that is the biggest attraction of crime as a genre, full stop. Crime is, you know, we talked about romantasy, or I did before. Crime fiction is the biggest selling genre all the time. Not just sometime, not just if Cosy's up, you know, Noir's down, whatever. In the UK a few years ago, crime fiction outsold all the other genres put together. And I think that idea of at the start, it's a knot, and by the end, it'll be a piece of string again, is one of the biggest attractions of crime fiction.
Justice is served, and we all know justice isn't served in life, you know, and that frustrates us all and makes us really angry. But in a crime book, justice will be served ultimately, and hopefully it'll be an entertaining journey getting there. But I think that's got a lot to do with it. Yeah.
It's order from chaos. Yeah. And don't we all want that?
Yeah. And if you look at the other best-selling genre of romance, it's the same thing. We want a nice ending.
Happy ending. A good resolution. But in crime, it's also going to be a mystery. So that going back to like your year 12's writing, twists. And crime fiction has a twist built into it at the end. I thought it was X. Oh, actually it's Y, which romance doesn't have. And I reckon that's the big difference that why crime will always be popular.
The moment on the page. Sorry. The moment on the page where the twist, where if you do the, oh, I didn't see that coming, that is perfect.
I think that's why crime fiction, even if you're reading and there's, you know, sometimes it's an average book, crime fiction you will not put down, whereas others you might walk away from.
Animal companions. What kind of animals?
Well, I had quite a few dogs in my last one, and they were honouring some real dogs. The rule that authors get told is don't kill your animals in the book. Really? People they don't care about the humans, they really do about the animals. And I wanted to honour two little dogs that sadly they have to die in real life, and these dogs died, and it was just the hole that got left by them. And so I quite happily put them in the book, not as quite the animal companion, but as an important part nonetheless.
In my book, Lovebirds, I had a budgie called Eric. And he turned out to be the absolute star of the show. So he was a speaking budgie, but he would regurgitate some phrase that my main character had said a week earlier in a completely inappropriate setting. And so that was so much fun to play with. Yeah, everybody loved Eric.
Ted Bristol actually has a miniature schnauzer called Miss Marple, who's acutely intelligent, somewhat aloof, and kind of helps her solve her crimes. She's based on a beloved, not a schnauzer, but a mini cavoodle of mine. She's intrinsic. She's the love of Ted's life, actually, I think.
So plotters are pantsers. Does everyone know what a plotter and a pantser is? So a plotter will think about what's happening in the book and plan it all out and knows exactly where they're going. A pantser will go, what a great idea. I'll just see how it goes. So are you plotter or a pantser?
Pantser. Yeah, I'd write the first sentence and then I figure out what the second sentence will be. So it's kind of like throwing down a creative gauntlet that says I will push myself to then. So in the opening of The Tea Ladies, Hazel sees a woman in an abandoned building. I have no idea why she's there.
Yeah, total pantser. Because you kind of want to be the first reader of your own book. And if you plotted it out, then there'd be no point me writing it because I know how it ends. Yeah. And also the main thing is, and you'll find this is really common, you're writing that first draft thinking, oh, I wonder who the murderer is.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope they turn up soon. I'm getting to the 3/4 mark. Running out of feet.
I think because of my background in TV, I'm a bit of a plotter because, literally in TV, you literally have to do a scene breakdown, which is literally scene one, exterior, blah, blah, who's in the scene, exactly what happens. So it's certainly not planned to that degree, but I might have sort of 7 or 8 pages of just what I want to happen in the book. And then I sit down and write from there. And it often changes, but I often get better ideas as I go, but it just helps me to have that, which probably does pay back to TV, I think. Yeah.
I think it's often a balance of a bit of plotting and a lot of pantsing.
Yeah, I'm a plotting pantser, I would say.
I use the hero's journey as my implanted in my brain. And, so the call to action, refusal of the call, blah, 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 blah.
Because it sounds like you're quite interested in structure. I love structure. I love weirdly structured books and something a bit different. And I've played with that myself. But I would suggest to you that if you're interested in structure, my favourite structure that I think about is actually a 5-act structure. And it's from John Yorke. The book's called Into the Woods, and he is a screenwriter from the UK, a very famous screenwriter in the UK. And even though it's about screenwriting, most writing books are about screenwriting rather than novels because it's more formulaic and also there's more money in it. But I would really recommend that to you. And the idea that I absolutely love, and I make sure it fits my books, is the midpoint. That something happens, whether big or small, to the protagonist right in the middle of the book that changes them forever. Now, it can be massive and really clear, and it can be tiny and really small that the protagonist doesn't even realise at that moment. But go and have a look at your favourite books, go check out their midpoints, and you will see something very important happens. And that really saves you from having a middle that meanders and just is not doing stuff. So I think, yes, things are more complicated than just the pure 3-act structure, but nevertheless, the 3-act structure is always useful to go back to once you've written it, just to tighten up in editing and just to think about it, challenge yourself against it.
Yeah, I think there's that old adage that you have to know the rules in order to break them. So if you study 3-act structure, and those are really good suggestions, then I think once you know those basic rules, and particularly about something happening in the middle to your character, because it's very easy to have a dynamic start and a dynamic ending and to kind of sag a bit in the middle. So I think that's very important. That's a really good tip. But yeah, just study things you like and see what that book about structure. I hadn't heard about that book, actually. Sounds great.
I love it. Yeah, strong recommending from me.
Okay, I think we've come to time. Thank you very much for being a part of this. Please thank my fabulous 3 authors here.
Lisa Coleman, Aoife Clifford, Amanda Hampson.
Clunes Booktown Festival is presented by Creative Clunes. Tax-deductible donations to keep our stories alive can be made at creativeclunes.org.au. This podcast has been made possible due to the generous support of the Hugh Williamson Foundation.